This is an evening of great news for the crowds of citizens in Israel. After a determined struggle of the opposition in the Knesset and great suffering of the public in Israel, it is clear to everyone that the most failing government in the history of the country has ended its way.
Let's get some analysis on this with Dan Arbell. He's the former Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Israel and is currently a scholar in residence at American University. He joins us from Rockville in Maryland. Thanks so much for joining us on the program. You know, there were so many politicians with different beliefs that came together to form this coalition in Israel. But then we saw things starting to crumble with members leaving and then the alliance ultimately losing its majority in April. Was this breakdown inevitable?
Since April, it seemed to be an inevitable course of action because without at least 61 seats out of the 120-seat Knesset, it was very hard to govern. So members on the right side of the coalition were protesting left-leaning policies. Members of the left side of the coalition were protesting right-leaning policies. This became impossible to manage for the prime minister.
And we actually played a soundbite just now from the former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he almost seemed gleeful in what we're seeing happening in Israel. Do you think we could see him make a comeback?
He's definitely going to try and make a comeback. He has not succeeded in 4 rounds of elections that took place between 2019 and 2021. The polls today still don't give him a solid majority in case of elections were held today, but he has a good chance of coming back, and equally he may lose. So it's still up in the air, and you know, maybe a 5th election will produce a 6th election and a 7th election. So it's really a constitutional and political crisis that Israel is going through, and there is no end to it at this point.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden is visiting Israel next month. The two are very close allies. You talk about this political crisis going on in Israel. How's Washington going to be looking at these developments?
So Washington is, of course, watching closely and is very concerned about what's going on in Israel. But I understand that Biden is planning to go ahead with his original plan and visit Israel, no matter who will be prime minister, because he wants to make a point on U.S. policy in the Middle East, and he continues afterwards to Saudi Arabia. But clearly, this evening in Washington, people are worried about the chance that maybe Mr. Netanyahu will be back, the chance that Israel's instability in the political system continues, and that impacts the broader region and many other issues that are important for U.S. interests.
Well, Israel may have 5 elections coming up in less than 4 years. Surely Israelis themselves must be exhausted, and not just in the political process, but also with the leaders who have brought the government to this point.
They absolutely are, and I think they're tired. They're worried about their livelihoods, about the economic situation, about the rising index price, about housing costs and many other issues, and Israelis want their government to deliver for them, and they're very frustrated to go from one election cycle to the other. And it turns out that we will see another election that will focus around pro-Netanyahu, the pro-Netanyahu camp versus the anti-Netanyahu camp, basically a repeat of 4 previous cycles. And when does this end? When will there be an end to it? So clearly, you're right to suggest that Israelis are very upset.
When will there be an end to this? That's the question so many people are asking this evening. Dan Arbell, really good to get your analysis. Thanks so much for speaking to us.
Appreciate it.